All right, so the question is, what about basically everything that's happening now in the US? So my apologies for not running through that. I feel like people probably are pretty up on that in this room, so that I focused on the other stuff to kind of situate the conversation, but it's totally fine to talk about what's going on today. So can you be more specific as to what aspect of what's going on that you'd like me to address?
Well, aside from the Berkeley protests and people accusing the movement of being anti-free speech, up to Steve Bannon saying that, you know, fascists and whites and neo-Nazis are just a handful of people. Quite apart from that, are people now claiming, there's a political trend, I guess, to try to call the group, a gang, and what's the story on that? Yeah.
Well, right. So
like
so
Rico or something.
right,
you know?
of course, right. So to catch up anyone who's not up to date, there have been reports coming out that there's discussion in the government about classifying Antifa as a specific organization, as a terrorist organization or a gang or criminal enterprise or what have you. So just at the outset, that doesn't make any sense. Antifa is not one group. It's a motive. I should have probably just taken a little care to do a little definitional work in the beginning. But in essence, it's a pan-left politics of social revolution applied to fighting the far right. Yeah, applied to fighting the far right, and is focused on direct action tactics. Doesn't turn to the state or the police to stop fascism. And that's another interesting thing, is that this is less of an issue in the United States, but in Europe, debates over anti-fascism have often fractured along the lines of, should we get the government to ban racial discrimination or fascist organizing or not? And so the militant anti-fascist tradition can perhaps most clearly be demarcated by those who, for the most part, are opposed to that strategy, opposed to it, one, for their anti-state politics in many cases, and two, for believing that that often is used against the left more than the right in practice, and there are plenty of examples of that. So when we think about the question being raised, it's important to realize that Antifa is an activity or a politics or a milieu, depending on how you think about it, and not a group that can be characterized as such. It's certainly not a quote-unquote terrorist organization. I kind of get long-winded and esoteric about the question of terrorism because I don't think it's a useful term to apply to anyone ever. So when people say, are Antifa terrorists, I say no, but I don't think that's a useful term. I think it's basically a way to excuse state violence in general, but that's another presentation. So in essence, we can see that there has been a tendency to try and classify anarchists and people that carry out direct action tactics and environmentalists and anyone who really deviates from the sort of electoral civil disobedience, quote-unquote, playbook as some sort of criminals that goes back over 100 years. I see it as essentially a variant of that. I think that certainly we need to understand it in the context of the Trump administration, where Jeff Sessions and so forth were told not to investigate the far right or white supremacists. And so clearly it's very politically motivated, but it's ridiculous and typical of how the government responds to radical politics.
How many do you think there are?
How many of?
Numbers of Antifa?
Well, I mean, in a certain sense, so the question is, how many anti-fascists are there? Everyone can raise their hand. No, I'm just kidding. No, in the U.S., well, I mean, part of it's the question of definition, right?
Correct action, like in Berkeley.
Well, first of all, anti-fascist groups don't usually publish their membership, so honestly, it's not possible to say. There are plenty of groups who don't even have group names. There's plenty of people who do this sometimes and other times. It's not possible to say, and yeah, so there's no membership, so I can't really answer that.